Marcus Johnson checked his watch as he guided his family through the busy airport terminal. It was 8:15 a.m., giving them plenty of time before their 10 o'clock a.m. flight to the Bahamas. His wife Amara walked beside him, keeping a watchful eye on their two children, Maya and Devon, who were excitedly pulling their carry-on luggage behind them. "Dad, are we going to swim with dolphins?" 14-year-old Maya asked, her eyes bright with anticipation. Marcus smiled. "That's the plan, sweetheart. We have it scheduled for our second day there." "And go snorkeling?" 12-year-old Devon added, nearly bumping into another traveler as he wasn't watching where he was going. "Devon, please be careful," Amara gently reminded him. "And yes, we'll do all those things. This vacation is long overdue." What most people around them didn't know was that Marcus Johnson wasn't just another traveler. As the founder and CEO of Johnson Capital Investments, he had built a financial empire over the past 15 years. 3 years ago, his firm had acquired a significant 28% stake in Vista Airways, making him the second largest shareholder and a member of the board. Despite their wealth, Marcus and Amara believed in raising their children to understand the value of normalcy. They didn't fly on private jets or demand special treatment. Today, they were traveling like any other family on vacation, in first class, yes, but as regular passengers on a commercial Vista Airways flight. As they approached the check-in counter, Marcus noticed the subtle changes in the attendant's expression. That brief moment of surprise when she saw his name on the reservation. It was something he had grown accustomed to over the years. "Good morning, Mr. and Mrs. Johnson," the check-in agent said with a professional smile. "We have you and your family confirmed in first class to Nassau. Your seats are 2A through 2D. "Thank you," Marcus replied warmly. After checking in their larger luggage, the family made their way to security. The lines were long, but they moved efficiently. Marcus used this time to check his emails one last time before the vacation officially began. "Promise me you'll put that away once we board," Amara said, nodding toward his phone. Marcus laughed. "I promise. No work for the next 7 days." After clearing security, they stopped for breakfast at an airport cafe. The children ordered pancakes while Marcus and Amara had coffee and fruit bowls. "Vista Airways has been doing really well this quarter," Marcus mentioned quietly to Amara as the kids chatted about their vacation plans. "I saw the reports," Amara replied. She worked as a corporate attorney and understood the business world as well as he did. "The new routes to Asia are performing better than projected." Little did they know that their peaceful family vacation was about to become complicated in ways they couldn't imagine. When their flight was called for boarding, the Johnson family gathered their belongings and headed to the gate. They joined the line for first-class boarding, Marcus noticing the mix of business travelers and other vacationing families. "Boarding passes, please," the gate agent requested with a smile. Marcus handed over their 4 boarding passes, and the agent scanned them. "Welcome aboard, Mr. Johnson. Enjoy your flight to Nassau." As they walked down the jetway, Maya turned to her father. "Dad, can we go shopping when we get there? I want to get something for Grandma." "Of course," Marcus replied, completely unaware of the trouble that awaited them once they stepped onto the plane. The Johnson family made their way down the narrow aisle of the Vista Airways Boeing 737. First class was located at the front of the plane, and Marcus guided his family toward their assigned seats. The cabin had that distinct new plane smell. Vista had updated their fleet just last year, something Marcus had strongly advocated for during board meetings. "Rows 1 through 4 are on your right," said a flight attendant standing near the cockpit entrance. Her name tag read Rebecca Winters. She offered a practiced smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. Maya and Devon moved ahead excitedly, pointing out their seats. "I get the window," Devon declared, rushing forward. "Slow down, buddy," Marcus called after him. As Devon hurried toward their row, he accidentally bumped into an older white man in an expensive suit who was placing his briefcase in the overhead compartment. "Watch it, kid," the man snapped, much louder than necessary. "I'm sorry," Devon said quickly, stepping back against his father who had caught up to him. The businessman looked at Devon, then at Marcus, his expression shifting subtly. "You need to control your son," he said coldly. Marcus placed a protective hand on Devon's shoulder. "He apologized, sir. It was an accident in a tight space." Rebecca Winters approached immediately, Her attention focused solely on the Johnsons rather than the businessman. "Is there a problem here?" she asked, her tone already suggesting she believed there was. "No problem," Marcus replied calmly. "Just a small bump. We're heading to our seats now." Several passengers were now watching the interaction. Amara stepped forward with Maya beside her. "We're in 2A through 2D, Amara said, showing their boarding passes to Rebecca. Rebecca took the passes, examining them with visible skepticism, her eyebrows raised slightly as she looked back at the family. "These are first-class seats," she stated, as if this were surprising information. "Yes, we're aware," Amara replied evenly, though Marcus could see his wife's jaw tighten, a sign she was controlling her annoyance. Rebecca handed the passes back slowly. "Very well. Please take your seats quickly as we need to prepare for departure." The businessman who had snapped at Devon was now settled in his seat, watching the interaction with a smug expression. A woman across the aisle had taken out her phone and was discreetly recording the scene. The Johnsons made their way to their row. Marcus helped Devon get settled by the window, while Maya took the window seat across the aisle with Amara beside her. "Dad," Devon whispered, "that lady doesn't seem very nice." "Some people just have bad days, son," Marcus replied, though he had noticed Rebecca watching them with unusual intensity as she prepared the cabin for departure. Other first-class passengers boarded, many giving curious glances toward the Johnsons. Marcus was used to being the only black family in first class on many flights. It wasn't something he discussed with his children, preferring to let them form their own observations about the world. Rebecca returned to their row. "Sir, is your son going to be settled during the flight? We've already had one incident." The question was asked loudly enough that nearby passengers could hear. "My son is 12 years old and perfectly capable of behaving on a flight," Marcus replied, keeping his voice steady and professional. "As I mentioned, that was a minor accident." Rebecca gave a tight smile, just making sure. Sometimes children get overexcited. As she walked away, Amara reached across the aisle and squeezed Marcus's hand. They exchanged a look that communicated volumes. They'd been here before. "Mom," Maya whispered, "why is that lady being weird to us?" "Just focus on your book, sweetie," Amara said softly. "We'll be in the Bahamas before you know it." Little did they know, their Bahamas vacation was about to be delayed, and Rebecca Winters was about to make a career-defining mistake. The seatbelt sign chimed on, and the captain's voice came over the intercom, welcoming everyone aboard Vista Airways Flight 372 to Nassau. Devon pulled out his tablet, ready to play games during the flight, while Maya opened a novel she'd been saving for the trip. Rebecca Winters was moving through the cabin, checking that all passengers had their seatbelts fastened. When she reached the Johnsons' row, she paused, eyeing Devon's tablet. "That needs to be in airplane mode," she said sharply. "It already is," Devon replied, turning the screen to show her the airplane icon. Rebecca frowned. "And your seatbelt needs to be tighter." Marcus noticed that Rebecca hadn't commented on any other passenger's seatbelt, but he helped Devon adjust it anyway. "There you go, buddy. All set." As Rebecca moved on, the businessman who had complained earlier caught her attention and whispered something. Rebecca nodded and glanced back at the Johnsons with a look of disapproval. The plane began to taxi toward the runway. Devon looked out the window excitedly, pointing at other aircraft. "Dad, look at that huge plane. Is that an F-380? "That's right." Marcus smiled, impressed by his son's knowledge. "You've been studying your aircraft." Suddenly, Devon's tablet slipped from his lap and landed with a small thud on the floor. As he reached down to retrieve it, his elbow accidentally nudged the businessman's arm across the aisle. "That's it," the man exclaimed loudly. "I can't take this. This child is out of control." Rebecca rushed over immediately. "What happened?" "This kid keeps bothering me," the man complained. "First bumping into me while boarding, and now this. I paid too much money to be disturbed like this." Marcus intervened. "Sir, it was an accident. He was just picking up his tablet." "Is there a problem with your son following basic etiquette?" Rebecca asked Marcus, her tone condescending. Several passengers were now watching the scene unfold. Amara spoke up from across the aisle. "Excuse me, but that's completely uncalled for. My son is behaving normally for a child his age." Rebecca turned to Amara with a cold expression. Ma'am, I'm trying to ensure the comfort of all our passengers. By now, several people had their phones out, recording the interaction. The tension in the first-class cabin was palpable. I don't feel comfortable flying with them, the businessman announced loudly. That boy is disruptive, and now the parents are becoming confrontational. Marcus remained calm, though his patience was wearing thin. My family has done nothing wrong. My son accidentally bumped someone. Twice. In a confined space. That's hardly disruptive behavior. Rebecca straightened her uniform jacket. Sir, I need to ask you and your family to move to the back of the plane where your children will have more room. The request hung in the air. Marcus and Amara exchanged glances, both recognizing what was happening. Our tickets are for these seats, Amara stated firmly. We're not moving. Rebecca's expression hardened. Then I'm afraid I'll need to ask you to leave the aircraft. If you don't comply, I'll have to call the captain and security. A murmur went through the cabin. One elderly woman across the aisle spoke up. That's ridiculous. The children are perfectly fine. Rebecca ignored her. Mr. Johnson, will you and your family exit the aircraft voluntarily, or do I need to escalate this? Marcus looked at his children. Maya's eyes were wide with confusion and hurt. Devon looked on the verge of tears, clearly believing he had done something terribly wrong. May I see your employee identification number? Marcus asked quietly. Rebecca pointed to her name tag. It's right here. Rebecca Winters, 45,721. Marcus nodded and stood up. We'll leave. Come on, kids. But Dad, Maya protested. We didn't do anything wrong. I know, sweetheart, Marcus said, his voice steady. Sometimes it's better to walk away with dignity than fight when others have already decided against you. As the Johnson family gathered their belongings, hushed conversations and the unmistakable sounds of phone cameras followed them down the aisle. The Johnson family walked down the aisle toward the exit, feeling the weight of dozens of stairs on their backs. Devon kept his head down, clutching his tablet tightly against his chest. Maya walked with her shoulders back, having inherited her mother's dignified posture in difficult situations. This is completely unacceptable, a woman called out as they passed. You can't just remove a family because of nothing. Rebecca Winters ignored the comment, maintaining a stern expression as she escorted the Johnsons to the door. I'm sorry it had to come to this, but we need to maintain order on our flights. As they reached the exit door, Marcus turned to face the flight attendant. His voice was calm but firm. I'd like the names of the captain and the ground supervisor, please. Sir, I've made my decision as the cabin authority, Rebecca replied. If you have concerns, you can contact customer service after your flight. After our flight? Amara interjected. The flight you just removed us from? A flight attendant from economy class had come forward, looking concerned. Her name tag read Jasmine. She whispered something to Rebecca, who brushed her off. I'm handling this, Jasmine, Rebecca said sharply. The family stepped off the plane onto the jet bridge. Devon finally let his tears fall once they were out of sight of the other passengers. Did I do something wrong, Dad? He asked, his voice cracking. Marcus knelt down to his son's level. You did absolutely nothing wrong. Nothing. Some people just... He paused, searching for the right words. Some people see us differently. Because we're black? Devon asked quietly. Marcus and Amara had exchanged a look. They'd had versions of this conversation before, but it never got easier. Yes, buddy, Marcus said gently. Sometimes that's part of it, but what's important is how we respond. With dignity and intelligence. As they walked up the jet bridge, Marcus pulled out his phone and made a call. The family couldn't help but overhear his side of the conversation. Victoria, it's Marcus. Yes, I know you're in a meeting. No, this can't wait. I've just been removed from Flight 372 along with my family. Yes, that's right, your airline. No, there was no legitimate reason. I understand. Yes, we're heading to the terminal now. He ended the call and looked at his family. Let's wait in the lounge. This situation is going to be addressed. At the gate, several passengers who had witnessed the incident had disembarked and were voicing their concerns to the gate agent. That family was treated horribly. An elderly man was saying, I have videos of the whole thing. Sir, if you're not getting back on the flight, You'll need to speak with customer service, the flustered gate agent replied. In the Vista Airways first-class lounge, the Johnson family settled into a quiet corner. Maya sat next to Devon, trying to cheer him up by showing him funny videos on her phone. What happens now? Amara asked quietly. Should we book another flight? Marcus shook his head. No need. Victoria is handling it. Victoria Chen, the CEO. Amara raised an eyebrow. You called the CEO directly. This isn't just about us anymore, Marcus replied. This is about every family who doesn't have the ability to make that call. 20 minutes later, a well-dressed woman rushed into the lounge, her face flushed with concern. Megan Torres, the airport's Vista Airways manager, approached the Johnsons with an expression of pure mortification. Mr. Johnson, Mrs. Johnson, I can't begin to express how deeply sorry I am about what happened, she said, slightly out of breath. We're reviewing the situation right now, and I've been instructed to offer you immediate accommodation on our next flight, which leaves in an hour. Or if you prefer, we have a private company jet that can be ready in 90 minutes. Marcus looked at his children, then back at Megan. The private jet would be appreciated. But that's not enough. I want a meeting with your HR director and Rebecca Winters when we return. Of course, sir. Anything you need, Megan agreed quickly. Ms. Chen has made it very clear that this is a top priority. As Megan left to make arrangements, Amara squeezed Marcus's hand. This isn't over, is it? No, Marcus replied, but it's about to change direction completely. Victoria Chen paced her corner office at Vista Airways headquarters, her heels clicking rhythmically against the hardwood floor. The view of the city's skyline through her floor-to-ceiling windows usually calmed her, but not today. On her desk, her phone buzzed continuously with notifications. Tell me exactly what happened, she said to the man on her video call. It was Terry Williams, the director of flight operations. The videos are already online, Victoria, Terry said, his face grim. Multiple passengers uploaded footage. It doesn't look good for us at all. Victoria rubbed her temples. And you're certain it was the Johnson family? Marcus Johnson, our board member? Yes, confirmed by gate staff and passenger manifests. Marcus Johnson, his wife Amara, and their 2 children. On the other side of the airport, Rebecca Winters sat in a small conference room, nervously twisting a paper cup in her hands. Across from her sat Jasmine Moore, the flight attendant who had tried to intervene earlier, and Carl Pethel, their direct supervisor. Do you understand what's happening right now? Carl asked, his voice tight with controlled anger. Rebecca shook her head. I was just following protocols for disruptive passengers. Jasmine sighed. There was nothing disruptive about that family, Rebecca. The boy accidentally bumped someone. Twice. That's not grounds for removal. The other passenger complained. Rebecca started. One passenger complained. Carl interrupted. While several others were recording what they saw as an injustice. Do you know who that family was? Rebecca shrugged. Some entitled people who thought the rules didn't apply to them. Carl pushed his tablet across the table, displaying a corporate profile page. That was Marcus Johnson. He and his investment firm own 28% of Vista Airways. He sits on our board of directors. He was instrumental in our expansion last year that created 300 new jobs, including the new route you've been assigned to. Rebecca's face drained of color as she stared at the photo of Marcus Johnson smiling back at her from the tablet screen. I had no idea. That's the problem, Jasmine said quietly. You shouldn't treat anyone that way, regardless of who they are. Back at headquarters, Victoria had moved to the conference room where her crisis management team had assembled. On a large screen, they watched social media metrics updating in real time. The hashtag Vista Airways racism is trending, said Preya Sharma from the PR department. We've got mainstream news outlets picking up the story now. What about the videos? Victoria asked. Multiple angles, crystal clear. You can hear everything, Preya replied. The worst part is how calm and reasonable the Johnson family remained while being treated poorly. Daniel Rodriguez, the company's chief legal counsel, spoke up. We need to get ahead of this. The optics are terrible. A black family who literally helps own the airline gets kicked off by a white flight attendant for no valid reason. Victoria's phone chimed with a text. She looked down and her expression softened slightly. Marcus says they're comfortable in the company jet and will be continuing to Nassau. He's not planning to speak to the press until after his vacation. That's surprisingly gracious, Daniel noted. That's Marcus, Victoria replied. He's always been more interested in fixing problems than creating headlines. She straightened up. But we need to fix this, and fast. I want a full investigation into Rebecca Winter's history with the airline. Check if there have been other complaints or incidents. 2 hours later, Victoria stared at a report on her desk. Rebecca Winters had 3 previous passenger complaints filed against her in the past year, all from passengers of color. None had been properly addressed by management. This is a systemic failure, Victoria murmured to herself. Her phone rang. It was Marcus calling from the company jet. Marcus, I can't begin to tell you how sorry I am, Victoria said immediately. I know, Victoria, Marcus replied. His voice was calm but serious. But this isn't about me or my family. This is about your company culture. When I return, we need to have a serious conversation about how Vista Airways handles these situations. Absolutely, Victoria agreed. I'm already looking into Rebecca's history with us. There's a pattern. Then it's not just about Rebecca, is it? Marcus asked pointedly. Victoria took a deep breath. No, you're right. It's not. I'll see you in a week, Marcus said. In the meantime, don't fire anyone. That's the easy way out. We need real change. As Victoria hung up, she knew that the next week would be the most challenging of her career, and that Vista Airways would never be the same again. Rebecca Winters sat alone in the staff break room, scrolling through her phone with shaking hands. The videos were everywhere now, her face clearly visible as she escorted the Johnson family off the plane. Some news sites had already identified her by name. Rebecca. She looked up to see Carl Paddle standing in the doorway. His expression was unreadable. They want to see you in the executive conference room, he said. Now. Rebecca swallowed hard. Am I being fired? Carl shook his head. I don't know, but if I were you, I'd prepare for something serious. The executive conference room doors were intimidating, large wooden panels with the Vista Airways logo etched in glass. Rebecca took a deep breath and knocked. Come in, called a voice from inside. Rebecca entered to find Victoria Chen seated at the head of the long table. Next to her sat Daniel Rodriguez, the chief legal counsel, and Priya Sharma from PR. A laptop was open in front of them. Miss Winters, please take a seat, Victoria said, gesturing to a chair directly across from her. Rebecca sat down, her hands folded tightly in her lap to hide their trembling. I assume you understand why you're here, Victoria began. Yes, ma'am, about the Johnson family incident. Victoria nodded. Let me be very clear about something. What happened on that flight was completely unacceptable, not because of who the Johnsons are, but because of how they were treated. Rebecca looked down at her hands. I understand. No, I don't think you do, Victoria continued, because this isn't the first time passengers have complained about similar treatment from you. Victoria slid a folder across the table. Inside were printed copies of 3 previous complaints filed against Rebecca, all from passengers of color who had described being treated with suspicion or hostility. I didn't realize there was a pattern, Rebecca said quietly. That's part of the problem, Daniel Rodriguez interjected. Most people with biases don't recognize them. Victoria leaned forward. Rebecca, do you know why Marcus Johnson hasn't demanded your termination? Why he specifically asked us not to fire you? Rebecca looked up, surprised. He did. Yes, and I'd like you to hear why. I have his permission to play this for you. Victoria tapped her laptop, and suddenly Marcus Johnson's voice filled the room from a recorded phone call. Firing Rebecca Winters might make the airline feel better, but it won't solve anything, Marcus's voice explained. Vista Airways needs to look deeper at how it trains its staff and how it handles these situations. Using Rebecca as a scapegoat lets the company off the hook for its larger responsibilities. Victoria stopped the recording. Marcus Johnson and his family were humiliated in front of an entire plane of passengers, yet his concern is for systemic change rather than personal retribution. Rebecca felt tears forming in her eyes. What happens now? That depends partly on you, Victoria said. The company is launching a comprehensive anti-bias training program for all customer-facing staff. We're also reviewing all our procedures for handling passenger complaints. Priya Sharma spoke up. We also need to make this right publicly. The story is everywhere. Victoria nodded. Which brings us to you, Rebecca. You have two choices. You can resign from Vista Airways, and we'll provide a standard reference. Or, you can acknowledge your mistakes, participate in the development of our new training program, and become part of the solution. Rebecca looked at each person around the table. You're giving me a chance to stay. It's not a simple chance, Victoria clarified. It will involve intensive training, working directly with diversity consultants, and yes, eventually meeting with the Johnson family to apologize in person. The room fell silent as Rebecca considered her options. Her entire understanding of herself and her actions over the past years was being challenged. I want to stay, she said finally. I want to learn and be part of fixing this. Victoria's expression remained serious. It won't be easy. You'll be under scrutiny, and you'll have to confront some uncomfortable truths about yourself. I understand, Rebecca said, straightening in her chair. When Mr. Johnson returns from his vacation, I'd like to apologize to him and his family personally. Victoria nodded. That can be arranged. In the meantime, you're on paid administrative leave while we develop the new training program. You'll be one of the first to go through it. As Rebecca left the conference room, she felt a strange mix of emotions, shame and regret, but also a sense of relief. For the first time, she would have to truly examine her own behavior and the biases she hadn't wanted to acknowledge. 1 week after the incident, Marcus Johnson's family returned from their vacation in the Bahamas. Despite the rocky start, they had managed to enjoy their time together, swimming with dolphins, snorkeling in crystal clear waters, and relaxing on white sandy beaches. The children's spirits had recovered quickly, though both Marcus and Amara noticed that Devon had become a bit more reserved around strangers. Are you ready for this? Amara asked as they gathered their belongings. Marcus nodded. It's not about punishment, it's about making real change. A company car was waiting to take them directly to Vista Airways headquarters. Maya and Devon would be dropped off at home with their grandmother, who had come to stay with them for the day. Dad, are you going to get that lady in trouble? Devon asked as they drove. Marcus turned to his son. This isn't about getting anyone in trouble, Devon. It's about making sure what happened to us doesn't happen to other families. At Vista Airways headquarters, the atmosphere was tense. Employees glanced at Marcus and Amara as they walked through the lobby, whispers following in their wake. Victoria Chen herself was waiting for them at the elevator. Marcus, Amara, thank you for coming, she said, shaking their hands firmly. Everything is ready upstairs. The executive boardroom had been prepared for this meeting. Seated at the table were Daniel Rodriguez, Priya Sharma, and Carl Patel. At the far end, looking nervous but composed, sat Rebecca Winters. Before we begin, Victoria said once everyone was seated, I want to thank the Johnsons for handling this situation with such grace and for giving us the opportunity to address it properly. Marcus nodded. We're here to listen and to contribute to solutions. Victoria turned to Rebecca. Miss Winters has something she would like to say. Rebecca stood up, her hands trembling slightly. She had rehearsed this moment many times, but facing Marcus and Amara in person was far more intimidating than she had imagined. Mr. and Mrs. Johnson, she began, her voice steady despite her nerves. There is no excuse for how I treated you and your children on that flight. I spent this past week examining my actions and recognizing biases I didn't want to admit I had. She paused, taking a deep breath. I am truly sorry for the humiliation and pain I caused your family. The room was silent. Marcus studied Rebecca's face carefully before speaking. Thank you for your apology, Miss Winters. I appreciate your honesty, he said. But as I told Victoria, this isn't just about one incident or one employee. It's about a culture that allowed this to happen. Victoria stepped forward. We've been working on a comprehensive plan based on your suggestions, Marcus. She handed out folders to everyone at the table. This is our proposed anti-bias training program. It will be mandatory for all employees, starting with our customer-facing staff. Marcus opened the folder and began reading through the materials. Amara, with her legal background, was already making notes in the margins. The program looks good on paper, Amara said, but how will you measure its effectiveness? Daniel Rodriguez spoke up. We're implementing anonymous reporting systems for both passengers and staff. We'll also conduct regular reviews and follow-up training. And Rebecca's role in this? Marcus asked, looking directly at the flight attendant. Victoria explained, if she's willing, Rebecca will become part of our training team, sharing her experience and what she's learned. We believe her perspective could be valuable. Rebecca nodded. I want to be part of the solution. I've already started working with the diversity consultants you recommended. Marcus considered this for a moment. It takes courage to face your mistakes publicly. I respect that. The meeting continued for 2 hours as they discussed the details of the program. Marcus suggested several improvements, drawing on his experiences not just as an investor, but as a black man who had faced similar situations throughout his life. As the meeting concluded, Marcus addressed the room. What happened to my family was unfortunate, but it creates an opportunity for real change. Vista Airways can set a new standard for the industry. Victoria nodded firmly. That's exactly what we intend to do. As Marcus and Amara prepared to leave, Rebecca approached them hesitantly. Mr. and Mrs. Johnson, I just wanted to say, your response to this situation has taught me more than any training program could. Thank you for giving me a chance to learn and grow. Amara smiled slightly. Everyone deserves that chance, Miss Winters. Make the most of it. As they walked out of the building, Amara took Marcus's hand. You know, most people would have just demanded she be fired. Marcus shook his head. Firing one person doesn't change a system, but this might. #. 6 months had passed since the incident that changed Vista Airways forever. On a crisp autumn morning, Marcus Johnson stood at a podium in the company's largest training facility, addressing a room full of airline staff, industry representatives, and media. Today marks the official launch of Vista's Inclusive Skies initiative, Marcus announced. What began as an unfortunate incident has transformed into an industry-leading program that we believe will set new standards for how airlines approach diversity and inclusion. Behind him stood Victoria Chen, beaming with pride, and Rebecca Winters, who looked both nervous and determined in her new role as a program coordinator. The journey to this moment had been challenging for everyone involved, especially for Rebecca. In the months following the incident, Rebecca had undergone intensive training with diversity experts. She had faced criticism from colleagues, threats on social media, and her own deep personal reckoning. There were days when she had considered quitting, walking away from the airline industry altogether. But something kept her going, the memory of Marcus Johnson's unexpected grace and the opportunity to transform her mistake into meaningful change. I'd like to invite Rebecca Winters to share her experience, Marcus said, stepping away from the podium. 6 months ago, I made a terrible mistake, she began, her voice clear and steady. I allowed unconscious biases to affect how I treated a family on one of our flights. That day changed my life in ways I never expected. She described her journey of self-discovery, the difficult conversations, and the moments of clarity that had brought her to this point. The easiest thing would have been for Vista Airways to fire me and move on. The easiest thing for the Johnson family would have been to demand my termination. Instead, they chose a harder path, one that required real work from all of us. In the audience, Amara Johnson sat with Maya and Devon, listening attentively. Devon had recently turned 13 and had grown taller in the past 6 months. The experience had matured him in other ways too. He had written an essay about the incident for school, which had won a regional competition for young writers. Rebecca continued, Today, every Vista Airways employee will complete our new training program. But more importantly, we're implementing structural changes in how we handle passenger conflicts and internal complaints. After the speeches during the reception, Maya approached Rebecca holding a glass of punch. My brother wanted me to give you this, she said, handing Rebecca a folded piece of paper. Rebecca opened it to find a drawing of an airplane with passengers of all colors sitting happily together. At the bottom, Davin had written, Everyone belongs in the sky. Rebecca felt tears forming but blinked them away. Thank him for me. This means a lot. Across the room, Marcus was speaking with a group of executives from other airlines who had expressed interest in adopting similar programs. Vista Airways had seen an unexpected benefit from the incident. After implementing the changes, customer satisfaction scores had risen dramatically, and employee retention had improved as well. The most powerful lesson, Marcus was saying, is that accountability doesn't have to mean punishment. It can be a pathway to genuine improvement. Victoria joined the conversation. The changes weren't easy or cheap, but they were necessary, and the results speak for themselves. Later that evening, the Johnson family sat together at their dining table, discussing the day's events. "Do you think it really made a difference, Dad?" Devon asked, pushing his vegetables around his plate. Marcus considered the question carefully. "Change happens slowly, son. But yes, I think we helped start something important." "The program is already being adopted by 2 other airlines," Amara added. "That's definitely making a difference." Maya looked up from her phone. "Rebecca seems really different now." Marcus nodded. "People can change when they're given the right opportunity. That's why it's important to stand up for what's right, but also to leave room for growth." As the conversation moved on to school and weekend plans, Marcus felt a quiet satisfaction. The incident had been painful for his family, but they had channeled that pain into positive change. Devon was smiling again, telling jokes at the dinner table. Maya was developing an interest in corporate social responsibility, partly inspired by watching her father's work with Vista Airways. What had started as discrimination on a flight had evolved into a powerful lesson about accountability, growth, and the possibility of transformation, not just for one flight attendant, but for an entire industry. Sometimes, Marcus reflected, the most meaningful changes come from the most unexpected places.